Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Unexpected events, accidents, and emergencies don't just happen when you're traveling. They can happen any day, every day. So, can you plan for them? No, but there are ways and means to prepare yourself for the unexpected. What we're going to do today is share with you stories from these three inspiring women, which will hopefully show you that the fear of unexpected events, accidents, and emergencies should never, ever stop you from traveling. I also need to preface this discussion that we're having today by saying that each and every unexpected event, emergency, and accident that happens when you're traveling is unique. There is no way that you will be able to take into consideration all of the variables. What we hope from today's panel is that you take the stories that we share, take the tips that we share, and tuck them away. They will come of use one day, they may not, but either way, you'll have that information at your fingertips or tucked away in the recesses of your brain to be able to be drawn on if and when you need it to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by getting Prachi, as well as Claire and Aisha, to each share with you a moment in time when they did have an unexpected incident when they were traveling. Aisha, let's start with you.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes? One that comes to mind is I actually went motorbiking in Vietnam for 1 month, so working and traveling, and I had this motorbike, and I was riding through the Vietnamese countryside, and what happened was I didn't plan it properly, and I remember I got there, I was still riding after dark, and there were potholes, and it was raining, and I got lost, and I could hear these has anybody been to Vietnam? The truck drivers riding past me, and I know that I was riding in the mountains, and I remember distinctly thinking, what would happen if they hit me? They probably wouldn't notice, they were going so fast. And this experience actually taught me to wisen up, actually. And now when I travel solo, when I'm going to certain areas, I try and avoid going after dark. I plan it properly. So it's one thing, as a woman especially, is it safe traveling alone? And that's one of my experiences which has taught me to travel safer.
Aisha, can you take us back to that night when you found yourself kind of alone and perhaps a little bewildered? What did you do at that point? What was the first thing that you did when you realized, I'm in a bit of a pickle?
Okay, so a lot of the time when things go wrong, we panic. You know, we're like, oh my God, and you think of the worst case scenario. And sometimes, you get anxiety attacks, you get panicky, and the first thing you need to do is stay calm. And it's easy to say.
Yes.
But I actually have breathing techniques, which you can actually just Google. You can breathe in and out and calm down. And then I said, okay, what do I need to do to get myself safe?
Yes.
And then I planned from there.
So what did you do?
So I realized I have a choice. I either stay overnight and probably get eaten by mosquitoes and die.
Was there accommodation or a village or anything like that?
There was a village, but the thing is I underestimated the time. So when you ride a motorbike, it's actually a lot slower than going in a car. Also my fault because I took a lot of photos. So basically, I underestimated the time, and I should have planned that. I should have actually taken into account, given myself a buffer.
Okay.
So that in that situation, I just ended up getting there too late, and I knew that there was a town there, but then I said, should I carry on? Do I have enough petrol? And in that scenario, I actually rode on, and then I stopped and asked somebody for help.
Okay. And you found accommodation for the night, or did you have to sleep outside?
I found accommodation for the night, yeah, but it was not planned.
Okay. All right. So that was an experience that you had while you were traveling solo, and I can imagine it was quite nerve-wracking. Prachi, you were out with a group of friends or in a group of people when you had an unexpected incident happen, and it was a logistics issue.
Yes, so I usually travel, as most of us will be knowing, with my sister, and that's why we are kind of Gumo sisters from India. And as the word ghumofiro itself means like to roam around. So one of the incidents that happened with us was that we were planning to do a snorkeling thing, and there is a small island near Bangalore, which is known as Netrani Island. So we reached to the beach area, and then we hired a steamer boat who could actually take us from the beach to that island itself.
How many of you were?
Just me, both of us were there.
So you and your sister.
Me and
Okay.
sister, and obviously the driver who was like driving the boat, steamer boat, right? In the midst of the Indian Ocean, he come up and say that boat suddenly stopped, right? And he told us that, ma'am, fuel is over.
He didn't check the fuel before.
Yes.
Okay.
At first, we like saw him speechless because obviously in the midst of ocean, there would not be any phone,
Could you see anything around you on the horizon?
No, nothing, and we literally panicked. At that very moment, the only choice we had was like either we could kind of scream or shout at the guy, or could be like keep our calm and composure and ask him that what is the next option, because apart from our life, even his life, he should be worried about his life more, right?
Please tell me he had a plan B.
He did not have plan B. I think it was simply destined that I'm alive, because suddenly, like after between these chit chats, etc., we just saw another boat coming towards us.
Okay.
We kind of asked them help, and thankfully we could come out of it and we could reach to the place. But yes, the key takeaway from this incident to me was, for both of us, was that whenever we are taking up any adventure sport, we need to make sure that it might sound that, yes, most of us want to travel unplanned, but there's a basic research is definitely important. You might not do your respective bookings, but it is very important that you kind of note down the things that, okay, I'm going for snorkeling, these are the things that I would need, these are the best of the folks who would get this done, rather than just going arbitrary and booking it on the fly.
Because a lot of people like this idea of free and easy travel. I don't want to be held down by an itinerary. I don't want to be to conform to have a tour.
That's absolutely right. That even I don't believe in getting the itinerary fixed down. But so, for example, if I'm opting for some adventure spot in my mind that's there, it's always a good idea to read a few reviews. And whenever you are reaching to the place there, you may always negotiate and you can ask the right questions. I think the key out here for us was asking the right set of questions before getting into it.
And
That
perhaps a question could be, do you have enough fuel for your boat?
In case if your boat cannot take that amount of fuel, do you have a plan B? Are you keeping the fuel extra fuel? So I think that's about it. Asking the right set of questions, especially with respect to the security and things around it, especially when you are taking up adventure sport, is very important.
Okay. So, we've had an experience traveling solo when things have gone wrong. We've had an experience when, traveling with your sibling and something has gone wrong. What Claire went through was, if you've not yet heard one of our talks or attended one of our workshops, what Claire went through was possibly a woman's worst nightmare, and she's graciously going to be sharing her story with us right now.
Great, thank you. Lovely to be here with everyone. And please excuse me, an unexpected event. I've picked up a little head cold, so I'm coughing, so please forgive me. Yeah, so what happened to me happened many years ago, actually. It was my first adventure. When I was 19 years old, I decided to go and live in Paris for a year. And I was there as a foreign student, and I was also self-funding myself, which meant I was working. And I was working part-time. And unfortunately, on the way home from this part-time job, which was in a bar, so it was quite late at night, I was going to get a taxi, and I didn't make it to the taxi. I was intercepted by a man, and he very violently attacked me. He tried to murder me, and he raped me. Something that you don't, it's not something that you think about when you go. It's not something that ever crossed my mind, going to Paris. I was born and raised in South Africa, and in Johannesburg, which is one of the most dangerous cities in the world. So I had thought that if this was ever going to happen to me, it would be in South Africa. Never crossed my mind that it would happen to me in Paris on the way to a taxi. It was back in an era where we didn't have mobile phones. And a lot of the things that we actually have today now that can help and facilitate us a lot more. So a very difficult experience. I was injured from this experience, so I knew I had to go to hospital, which was also a very difficult choice to make. No one wants to be a victim of sexual violence, and the thought had crossed my mind, do I go home and pretend this never happened? But I did have these injuries, and I actually wasn't sure if they were life-threatening. So I knew I'd have to go to hospital, and I'd heard really bad stories about how they handled rape in France. So just taking on that sort of decision to face what came next, which was also a horrific experience, very difficult. I had to go actually to a local, I knew that where I was, I knew that there was going to be a late night bar that was open, and I did know the people there, and my colleagues had gone there after work. So I knew that potentially there was somebody that would know me and be able to help me. And at the very least call the police. What's interesting is when I arrived there, I collapsed and I said I need help, but they didn't actually automatically call the police. We sat in there they gave me some water and about half an hour, and then I was like, when is the ambulance coming? You know, when are the police coming? And they're like, we haven't called them. And I was like, no, please call them. And they had also made the decision of, they weren't sure that that's what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, in certain countries, how this kind of situation is handled by the services of that country don't always have a good reputation, so it's not always the first choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Claire, so I know this from our conversations that after the rape, after that traumatic event, it would not have been unthinkable for you or for anybody else in that situation to turn around and say, I'm never traveling again. I cannot do this. I cannot open myself up to this sort of trauma ever again in my life. And yet, you are 51 countries and counting.
Yes.
How do you do this?
So I have to go into a little bit of detail. So because of my story, what happened was, after the rape, they never caught the man. But what was very unique was they caught him 10 years later through DNA. Yeah, and I was actually required to go back to France and go through a legal proceeding.
You had to face him.
I had to face him in court. Unfortunately, in France, rape is not a crime against the state. So if the victim doesn't prosecute, the perpetrator walks free. So if I wanted any justice, I had to go there and do that. And from this experience, I realized that there was a need to speak out and heal completely, because I actually hadn't healed properly from what had happened to me. And those two things prompted me to do what I do now, and I'm running 16 kilometers of beach in every single country of the world. And I have been to 51 countries across most regions, so I've been to some really scary places. And I think the reason I can do it now is I don't want to let what happened to me define me in any way, and I don't want it to ruin my life or to take away the opportunities I might have. I am a lot more cautious. I have learned so much from that experience in how to prepare. I'm a very vigilant travel preparer now, to know what to look out for, how to stay safe, who to trust, what are the various markers, what are your backup plans if something happens. And I'm not overboard, I don't go crazy, but I just know that back preparation can, it gives me the sense of confidence that I know that I can be safe.
Okay.
And then if something does happen, I know what to do.
Right. And we're going to get into all of those points that Claire mentioned shortly, but I want to reiterate something that I said earlier on. Each and every unexpected event, emergency or accident that happens to you while you are traveling is unique. It is different. And it's not about comparing one experience against another. It's not about resolving one accident, emergency, or event and thinking that this might or this won't ever happen to me again. It might not, but the skills that you equip yourself, what you learn about how you responded in that first event, will then guide you through the next one if and when it does happen. So today's panel isn't about comparing experiences, it's about preparing yourself for experiences. Claire raised some very, very interesting points about how she prepares herself, worst case scenarios. We're going to go into all of that right now. I'm going to ask all three panelists a series of questions, and these are questions that I suppose anybody would have at the top of their mind if they were planning to embark on travel, whether it's solo travel or whether it's to a new country. These are all questions that everybody has. What the panelists are going to do is share individual experiences where those questions have had to be answered in their head, and I hope that you'll be able to take away little nuggets from what they are saying and tuck it away. Okay, so let's get started with something that a lot of people, I think this is the biggest question. What if I get robbed when I'm traveling and I lose everything? Well, what happens then? Prachi, you want to start?
Sure, thanks, Sumitra. So I think, thankfully, so far, I do not have any personal experience on that. But yes, as a safety measure, what I usually do is I keep things that I usually keep in my bag, in my purse. I usually keep them distributed across the thing, across the bags.
So when you travel with your sister,
Yes.
you split the money between the both of you, right?
Not only the money, we like even our iCards, etc. They are definitely, we do have a digital copies as well, but what if our phone gets also stolen as a part of it? We keep the Xerox copies, each at least 2 to 3 copies in our purse, bag, in the different bags as well. My suggestion, my pro tip on this is, in case you get robbed, make sure that back home there's some person who can actually do the wire transfer. That's one. Secondly, in case you are traveling to the different country, make sure that you reach out to the embassy first. I think embassies should be your first point of contact, who should be able to help in such kind of situations.
Aisha, what are your thoughts on this? What if you were in a strange city and you did get robbed or pickpocketed and you lost all your important documents?
Well, I live in Barcelona, and I don't know if you know, it's a city of pickpockets. Every single person I know in Barcelona has been pickpocketed, including myself, twice. So in terms of, okay, so let me think. I always have 2 separate bank cards.
2 separate bank cards?
Totally.
Okay.
So let's just say if I'm traveling to a foreign country, I will have 2 separate bank cards. One of them I will have a limited amount of funds in. The other I will keep separately in my accommodation.
Okay.
So it protects you. Say you lose your cash, lose a limited amount of funds in that one card, you have a backup. The consular service absolutely is very important. And also, well, depending on the country, you can go to the police, and that's relevant to each country. In New Zealand and in the UK, but I know in certain countries you can't. But for myself, the consular and having control over your finances, so you're not completely at the help. You're not helpless. You have ways to access your money.
As seasoned travelers, would you recommend cash or credit or a combination of both?
Combination for myself.
Yeah, and some countries now don't take cash.
Yes.
So I've been to the Scandinavian countries, they don't accept cash anymore. So definitely having a variety of ways of paying, though, definitely. And separate, not the same account.
And just to add, there's been many times, and I guess we have other examples, when me reaching out and being friendly with other women has helped me. So let's just say if you make an effort with other women when you go to a new place, smile, ask them how they are, engage with them. That could actually save you in many situations. So let's just say if you do get robbed, and if say you have access to online banking, you've made a friend and you need money, you can wire them some money and they can help you out. So never underestimate the power of having a connection with a human being.
Okay, so we're going to come back to that a little while later. I've got an interesting question about that. But next to getting...
Sorry, can I just, because I've actually had something stolen as well.
oh, yeah, no, your laptop and your whole bag.
Yeah, so
Paris.
I didn't lose my personal belongings in the sense of my wallet or my passport, but I had my laptop, my phone, and my hard drive all taken in one bag, which was quite daunting because everything was gone. The lesson I learned from that particular one was use a cloud service to store your documents. Really important. But what I wanted to talk about, just something that I used from this particular experience was I claimed back on travel insurance.
Travel insurance.
And so there were a number of steps required to do that, of course, which does mean going to the police. And this actually happened in France. Drat France, all these terrible things. But their police service, there is so much theft and pickpocketing in Paris that you actually make your claim online. And you don't even have to go into a police station for basic claims. And then once you've done that, then you are able to activate your travel insurance. And it was a very positive experience from that.
Okay, so I do want to get into the other questions, but you've raised a really important point about travel insurance. I think we need to set the stage kind of early on about how we feel about travel insurance. Prachi?
So for me, I think travel insurance is important when you are traveling to a different country. But if you are any which ways within the same country, travel insurance, there are things that can work within the country or not, because especially we usually travel within India and explore that. Therefore, but the key point in travel insurance, taking any travel insurance, is make sure that you are aware that what is it being included, because most of the time travel insurance turns out to be a little scam as well. They say that we don't include your medical things and other stuff. So you really need to be very careful and read through the things, that what kind of travel insurance you are taking part of.
So when you say you've got to be aware, before signing on to any travel insurance, make sure that you read the fine print all the way through. See what it covers, see what it doesn't cover, see what the limitations are. Yeah. What about your experience with travel insurance? Claire, would you say it's a must-do?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's something that one should consider not doing. As Prachi said, in your own country, it might be a bit different because you have a medical system and things like that. But if you're taking flights, of course, you want travel insurance to cover for delays and things like that. So I always budget for travel insurance. It's not that much more, but it becomes part of the planning for the budget for travel. And having had a lot of real-life experiences and knowing that I've got travel insurance has made me feel a lot more safe and secure.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important point to be able to note as a key takeaway, right? Many of us, when we do travel, we look at accommodation, we look at flights, we look at events and activities, we look at reservations of different restaurants we want to go to, whatever it is. But travel insurance needs to be way up there in your list of budgeting. If it means that you have to spend less on a hotel room and put some of your budget towards travel insurance, you do it. Travel insurance is not an afterthought.
Absolutely. I mean, confession, before, I never really liked travel insurance, but through my travels, I realized actually you are protecting yourself. So when I climbed up to Everest Base Camp, I took on travel insurance purely because when I found out if I got helicoptered off, it would bankrupt me. I can't afford it. So, travel is amazing, but you need to protect yourself from risks. But the good side of it is because I knew I had travel insurance, it enhanced my travel experience because you don't want to travel thinking, gosh, I can't do this, I can't, there's so many adventure activities we can do, right? And, if you're worrying about doing this and doing that because you could eventually break your arm and then have to pay for it, it's going to actually ruin your experience. So I think getting the right, and key is right travel insurance that covers you for your adventure is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so let me ask you this. If between the three of you, if you could give me specifics, how do you look for travel insurance? Would anybody be able to help with that? How do you identify which is the right travel insurance for you?
Well, I was actually going to add a point because sometimes travel insurance might not be for you, but you need to be insured. So I don't know for Aisha, because you're in Barcelona, living in Barcelona, but for say someone wants to be a global nomad,
Okay.
travel insurance is not necessarily that catered if you're going to go and live in a country for 6 months, but there's expat insurance.
Right.
Or your country, like Malaysia, may have an agreement with the health system of certain countries, meaning that if you have a health card here, you may be able to access basic health care in the country that you're going to. But those will require a certain amount of research.
Which means that if you do have personal insurance in whatever country that you are resident in, make sure that you also read the fine print to find out in which countries that you're traveling to you are covered by. Is that right?
So that's just to say that it's not always about, there's other insurance options, but...
I think it's about, just to add to all these points itself, it's more about whichever country you are traveling to, make sure that what are the things available there and what you are taking in. Are you able to cover those, especially the travel delays and the luggage part, plus your health insurance part. So I think these are the two key things that you would want to make sure that they are being covered.
Okay, so I'm going to take a quick kind of pause at this point, and I'm going to move away from this topic of travel insurance, and Aisha's going to share with us a story of a time that she didn't have travel insurance, but it didn't matter. Your time in New Zealand.
Right, so I grew up not skiing. I'm not a skier. I went to New Zealand. For some reason, I thought I could ski, and very gung-ho, you know. Semangat, as they say. So I actually went skiing, and I remember going up and seeing people doing ski jumps. And I don't know what came over me. I decided to do a ski jump. And I thought, wow. And I remember distinctly jumping and really being quite surprised when I wasn't going forward, I was going backwards. And I fell backwards. And I've never given birth, but fair play to the women. I'm sure it's like, it was so excruciating. I remember just screaming and screaming. And then, because there were people jumping over me, and they were like, move, move, come on, they're going to fall on you. And I was like, and I couldn't move my legs. And they had to toboggan me down and helicopter me off. And I remember when they were trying to helicopter me, trying to fight with them, because in Australia and New Zealand, health care is so expensive. And I said, I can't afford 20, 30 grand for a helicopter. I can't. Right now, I can't. And I remember being terrified and trying to fight them off, and they just strapped me up. But actually, in New Zealand, they have this thing, and I researched, double-checked it was relevant, and it's still relevant till today. They have ACC, accident compensation, for tourists also. So you don't necessarily have to be resident in order to be covered if you're injured. So if you get into an accident in New Zealand, and you don't have travel insurance, which you should, actually, the New Zealand government will actually pay and help for your costs.
Not that we're advocating that you jump off ski slopes like Aisha did, but that's just a little tip and nugget for you to...
I just want to add something also, and just an advice to women. I've actually went back, I was terrified, and I've gone back since, and it was the hardest thing, but now I ski, and if I can do it, you girls can do it too.
What Aisha's not telling you is she broke her back in that accident. And here she is today. Okay, so speaking of medical emergencies, the next biggest thing after being potentially being robbed, and another fear is, what if I fall sick in a foreign country and I have to be in hospital? What do I do? Prachi, I remember you fell quite violently ill.
Yes, so I do have not in a foreign country, in India. It's the
India
same country
itself?
itself.
Okay.
So it was our initial trips way back around 2007, when both me and Himadri were kind of typically naive for traveling. And we went to, by that time we did not know this term. There is something called AMS, that is acute mountain sickness. So just to the interest of the group, when you travel up into the heights, you usually, because of the oxygen deficiency and etc., you tend to have some kind of nauseatic, and that's primarily what is referred as AMS. So like we were in Shimla, we were in some hill station and little high on the hills. I think it was Kufri at the time, and Himadri suddenly started having a little panic attack. She could not breathe, and as an elder sister, I could literally petrified. I just really do not know what to do. And especially it was our first solo trip, but it was just our solo trip together. And the place, since it was a little remote place, we were not even aware of any of the hospital things and medical facilities. So I think in such situations, when you are kind of in a remote place, it was the help, with the help of a local person.
Okay.
We actually bring her out to the life, literally life. She was completely like, I was very nervous. I really do not know what to do. And I think it was, so I would suggest that it's always important to have a good relationships with the locals as well, especially when you are traveling to remote places. Because as Aisha clearly mentioned, a smile with the local people, exchanging a smile does really help, because they are the most, because they definitely want the tour, they really care for your tour, for the tourists. They really want that people should always talk good about them. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
So for me, it was more about, yes, we do wanted to go to reach out to the medical facilities, etc. But if you are in a remote place, make sure that you take that, you don't shy away reaching out to the locals, because for them it's a day-to-day thing. They have been surviving there, so they know the survival tips much better than us.
Okay.
And today, I think later on, they actually told us that while you are in hills, make sure that you drink a lot of water and everything. And I think taking their tips, we both of us would have been successful in going to the Everest Base Camp now.
Okay, so take advice from locals on how to kind of prepare yourself for the travel. Coming back to this whole thing of being hospitalized or medical care in foreign countries, Claire, I'm sorry to wail on France, but France isn't the most friendly place for medical care for tourists, is it?
No, it's not. And unfortunately, I mean, it's improved a little bit, but people don't speak English in France. That was sort of an eye-opening experience for me. I could actually speak some French, but what I did learn from the experience, so I went to hospital after the rape and went to the emergency room, which was quite an awful experience. I spent about 8 hours in the emergency room and spent a night in hospital. And the one thing, like, unfortunately, when you're raped, and this is something that people don't talk about, they take away all of your personal effects, all your clothing, everything as evidence.
Yes.
Which means you're left with nothing but a hospital gown, which is open at the back. And so you're left feeling very, very vulnerable. I was very fortunate because I set some balls in motion. I realized that I needed to reach out to people I knew for help. So I had reached out to some close friends who were then able to, now no mobile phones at this era, but everyone, there was a sort of like the traditional clan way, you know, the messages spread, and I was sharing a flat, so I had my housemates able to bring me some clothing and things like that. But the one thing I didn't do and I didn't know to do, I was very young and I hadn't had this experience before, was that, and people don't tell you you have rights and what those rights are. I had the right to ask for an interpreter, particularly when it's an accident or you're a victim of crime. And if they're not amendable to that, you have a right to call your consular.
Okay.
And when you call your consular service, they will arrange for either someone from the service to come to you or to get an interpreter arranged for you. That's definitely something that I think most countries, you can reach out to your consular service. They have an emergency after hours number normally available. So definitely, and that's when you go traveling, have that information somewhere handy. It's really could come in service for that particular situation.
Because this whole thing about falling sick or feeling ill when you travel is, it's as our panel is titled, it's completely unexpected, right? I mean, for example, you could have planned a travel to a lovely tropical country and 2 days in, it's enveloped in haze and you find yourself with respiratory trouble. What do you do? So, Aisha, what would you do in that sort of a situation?
When I'm in the haze?
Or no, when you're in a foreign country.
I think we're all in the haze at the moment. But well, I mean, I actually felt quite sick in Kathmandu. I thought I was being smart by not eating meat because I thought maybe if I go vegetarian and there's no risk of contamination.
Food poisoning.
That's right. So I thought, woo, vegetarian, I can be healthy. And I saw, do you know what lassi is? It's like a yogurt.
A yogurt drink.
So I saw this lassi and it looked delicious and I drank the lassi. I actually put a hashtag on Instagram, hashtag lassi, you know, and that made me severely sick.
Hashtag unpasteurized milk.
Exactly. So I thought I was being, you know, suave, but actually that made me incredibly sick. And I remember in Kathmandu twitching in the dark, in pain, thinking, I'm going to die. You know, I have a lot of moments in life, it's very, very dramatic, but actually, what helped me in that situation, again, was my connections with people. So I think people interest me, and I love talking to people. And I remember when on my journey on the way in the reception and the people around me, I made connections with a lot of women, and I reached out to them, and they went and got me medicine. They brought me to see a doctor, and they were incredibly helpful, and they brought me food every day, and they nursed me to health. And also, social media is amazing. Reaching out to your family and having them, you never underestimate the power of having that support and keeping in contact with them every day.
Okay,
Oh,
so...
sorry, can I just add something about the medical one? Because I brought it up in my workshop this morning.
Yes.
Something that's really important to help you if you do fall sick and say you can't get to the hospital, for example, or you don't know where to go. There is some pre-preparation you can do, which is going to visit your doctor or a medical doctor before you leave, getting your vaccinations, super important, and taking a small first aid kit. It doesn't have to be big, but you have some of the basics in there, so the ones that stop you from vomiting, the ones that stop diarrhea, because you don't want to be dehydrated. Malarone for malaria. There's a couple of probiotics are really great to take before you go.
I would suggest an analgesic, something for pain, something light for pain. Don't get an NSAID that's going to cause stomach trouble. An analgesic for headaches or fevers. You should definitely get an antiemetic or anti-diarrhea, something to stop cramps. That always works. Charcoal tablets are a lifesaver. At least 2 strips of ultracarbon in your medical kit for sure. I find a little container of Difflam or something to be able to stop a sore throat in its tracks is always helpful. And perhaps...
Tea tree oil.
Tea tree oil.
It's an antifungal, antibacterial, anti-everything. Works really well.
I also recommend antihistamines. So
great.
If you get scratched with those bugs, if you have an allergy, you don't know what you're going to be allergic to.
And that's a great point, because with antihistamines, it's really, you might even find it handy if you go and sleep in a hotel and the pillow, for example, gives you an allergy. An antihistamine will stop the streaming eyes in its tracks, right? Okay, so I want to go back to something all of you have been saying repeatedly all throughout the answers to my questions, reaching out to locals, making friends with women. What I want to know is, when I travel, how do I know who to trust? Claire?
Yes, that one can be a bit tricky. I've been to 51 countries now, and because of the reason why I'm traveling, I'm getting to learn that sometimes who we think we can trust is not the people that we can trust. So unfortunately, not always law enforcement is going to be the first point of call. I think what Aisha's been saying is really important. Your immediate circle. So if you are staying at an Airbnb or at a hotel, linking in with the people that are there, that they know who you are, that they keeping an eye out for you. You know, sometimes you can maybe even have an emergency number.
So if you're staying at an Airbnb, connect with your host and who the local caretaker is. If you're staying at a hotel or a bed and breakfast or a motel, connect with the concierge or the front desk and make sure that they are aware of some of your plans, perhaps.
I do something as well. I like to do a lot of adventure, and I don't like to always plug into the tourist group adventure. So I use something called Meetup.
Meetup.
Meetup is a social platform where locals normally plan events in the country, in the city. It's been amazing. The first time I used it outside of my own country was in Hawaii, and I wanted to go kayaking. And I was on a tiny budget, and Hawaii is quite expensive. And I didn't want to do the tourist way, and so I joined the kayak group, and it was amazing because what happened from that was I not only had an amazing kayak experience, I formed a community on the island that were looking out for me for the rest of the time I was there. And I knew I had people I could call on if anything happened.
So Aisha, earlier on you mentioned that a tip that you would recommend is reaching out to a small circle of women, make friends with them. How do you know who you can trust?
Well, I think that I know it sounds a bit cliche, but we have our instinct, okay? And often the times that I've ignored my instinct, the worst thing has happened. And something that I'd like to also, that's helped me a lot actually, is sometimes we don't speak up and we don't protect ourselves because we're scared of offending. So I am of mixed heritage, I'm half Asian, and naturally, if someone's rude or someone's disrespectful, I used to let it go because I think, I don't want to be confrontational. So an example is I went to the full moon party and there were some guys there, and one of the guys made a comment about, oh, I'm going to take you to bed later on tonight. Sorry, Mum, if you're here. And I remember, like, the rest of the guys, yeah, man, they're laughing. And I remember thinking, I'm not comfortable with that. And I could have just laughed. When people sometimes insult, they cover it with a joke. And I remember thinking, I'm not okay with that. And I called him out on it, and I was like, I'm not going to bed you or any of you tonight. Don't even try. And I know it's easy for me to say this, going through experience and being confrontational, but it's actually learning how to call things out gently in your everyday life, and it's a skill that I've learned over time. To actually, if you're not comfortable with it, trust your instinct, and just make it known that you're not comfortable.
So trust your instincts also when it comes to trusting new people. Yeah?
So just want to add to what just Aisha and Claire mentioned. I think apart from trusting your instincts, it's always important that you are being a little observant as well.
Observant?
Yes, so once you are observing, so by their actions, at least you get to know that what is running on their mind at times. And obviously, over the course of travel and over the course of your experience, you really get to know that whom you can trust while on your travel. For me, I think I usually trust the folks who are kind of travel in the family. So even like, for example, if we take up the homestays wherein it is completely run by a complete family, not by an individual or
Okay,
like
so
that.
that's a great point. So try and approach homestays or Airbnbs that are run by families rather than individuals.
And even on the streets, if you're in an incident and you don't know who to speak to, going towards a family, you're more likely to, you'd probably find that they're a safer option.
So if you're lost, for example, a good sort of contact point would be if you don't know who to approach, try looking for a family.
And there's something actually, to follow on what Aisha was saying, and something I've noticed a lot in some countries, and some of you actually might have had this experience already. There are countries where men like to follow women around on the street to try and pick them up.
Yes.
It's their pickup technique. And they'll follow you for a while and they'll approach you and ask you for your number. And now my young, naive self, when that first happened, and also I've grown up in a culture which is, you don't say no, you don't stand up for yourself. So you tend to, when they ask for your number, hand it over. You don't have to hand your number over. You can say no, it's have a nice day, you don't have to be rude, but you certainly don't have to be handing your number over to people you've never met before.
Okay, all right. Sorry,
Just a quick one also. When I look at location, because for me location to certain places, in Hostel World they have a location, you know how they have different segments of safety, and you can look at the location tab and the comments people make on Hostel World.
Okay. So this is a really important one, I feel. And it may or may not happen to you, but what if I run out of money while I'm on holiday? Or if the currency crashes? It happens. It happened to Claire.
Okay, thank you. So I ran in India in November 2016 and arrived in India 2 hours before the currency crackdown. So if anyone doesn't know on that, at about 8 p.m. on the 11th of November, I think it was, something around there. There you go, it's engraved in my memory forever. The government announced that the two most common banknotes, which is the 500 and 1,000 rupiah, were no longer of value, no longer in circulation. I had come through the airport 2 hours before and changed my money and had been given 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. No one knew. It was a complete, a surprise announcement. So I had to get through India for 2.5 weeks with no money whatsoever. Yeah, it was quite... Yeah, it was a very daunting experience because 1.2 billion people were in the same situation. So you couldn't just reach out to strangers for help. I did realize, and that was the first time I think where I really had to call on the help of strangers. I used online services, which was amazing. So thank goodness for Uber in India, because I could get around, because you can't use tuk-tuks or anything like that because you've got no cash. My biggest concern was drinking water, because I couldn't buy any water. So we found someone in the building where I was staying who had a water filter, and they were very happy to fill up bottles for people. A restaurant offered to give me free meals. I just started to, I did go to commercial places, so I didn't just go to random strangers. I went to places that were sort of busy, like for telecommunications. I went to a phone shop, and there were scary moments of like, you know, I hope that this person is trustworthy, but you trust your instinct, and your instinct is saying it's okay, and just being very, very. The one thing though is you stay calm. Nothing you really can do to change the situation.
Okay, so let me ask the three of you this, right? We've gone through various scenarios. If you've, you know, got robbed, if you're sexually assaulted, if you fall sick, if you're lost and you can't find your way back to your accommodation. What if all of this or one of this happens to you in a country where you don't speak the language? What do you do? Aisha?
Well, I didn't really speak Spanish, and I turned up in Barcelona, and okay, let me think. So something happens and I don't speak the language. I think it's possible to communicate not only through language. What I would do, I would get a pen and paper. You can draw. You're able to connect with people through your body language, and I think that's how I get by when I can't speak the language, is you just have to, was it charades? Yeah.
Yes.
I used charades, and then I probably would draw. And to be honest, before I go to a country which I don't know, there are phrases that are quite important that I note down on a piece of paper or my phone. So like, help me, ayúdame in Spanish. So there's certain things which you can put down in a separate language, which could help you in a scenario where you don't speak the language.
Prachi?
I had an experience where, so we were in Uzbekistan, and we were outside the church, and we were looking for a cab, but we could not explain anyone in which hotel we have to go. So eventually, as she rightly mentioned, that we kind of went inside, brought a pen and paper, and we kind of drew something like sun kind of thing, and told him like it's little near, and that's how we were able to convince him to, so that we could reach to our hotel. And since then, I think the pro tip for us has been the basic things, basic statements, basic items, basic lines, we kind of keep it in the right, get them written in that same language, and keep it with us so that we can actually showcase.
Okay, so what you're saying is, if you go to a country where you don't speak the language or you don't write the script, what you could do is perhaps ask your concierge or your host or somebody that you trust to be able to write those phrases down on a piece of paper or onto your phone, and to keep them with you so that you can kind of do the point thing, right?
And the other one with that is not only write down phrases, but write down where you're staying and a telephone number from where you're staying, and maybe the telephone number of your consulate in the local language, in the local script. And keep it separate to your handbag or your backpack. Keep it in your pocket or pinned to your bra with a pin, a safety pin, because if everything's stolen, you need to be able to have that. So very, very useful.
Okay. At this point, what I'm going to do is, I've been asking a lot of questions. Do you have any questions out on the floor that you'd like to check in with our panelists? Oh, I see a hand up right at the very end. Could we get a mic runner to last row on my right, please?
Hi,
Could you just let me know what your name is and what the question is?
Hi, my name is Kyrun. It is not a question. It's actually an additional scenario which I don't think has been covered. I was traveling with 2 children under 5, and we were crossing multiple borders from Europe to Asia, and we did some research because we crossed over 15 borders within 30 days, and one of the countries that we were crossing over from Poland to St. Petersburg was Belarus, and so On the website, it tells you that Malaysians have a 7-day visa-free option.
Okay.
But what they don't tell you is that you can only apply for this at an international airport. And so as we crossed over the border, we were told by the local border police, that we weren't able to cross, and we would need to be deported. And so we tried everything. We tried the tears. We tried. We could see the train that we were going to get on, and we just said, we would be happy to be under your care and just get on that train. We need to get to St. Petersburg tomorrow. But what I found really helpful was, even though I had been living in Europe for about 2 years already, I had my Malaysian SIM card.
Okay.
And so as we were crossing all the borders, your SIM cards may not work because we were leaving Europe, we had no one to call. So what we ended up doing was I put in my Malaysian SIM, I paid for a roaming for a day, and I called home. So in some situations, if you find yourself in a fix, always have your local SIM with you so you can call someone for help.
Have your local SIM as in from your own country of
right.
origin.
That's right. It's especially if you're going to be in places where you don't have the currency, where you don't carry, you may not have cash with you,
right.
And you don't speak the language, and you need help.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions?
I'd like
Yes.
to add something to that, if you don't mind, because I had a recent experience as well, which I was meant to go to Ukraine a couple of weeks ago, and I use a tool that the Australian government has produced called Smart Traveller. .gov.au, and I believe there's one here in Malaysia as well, but I know that the Australian one is extremely up to date. They basically have a country page, and it's broken down to a lot of different topics, but it's to be a smart traveller, and if there's any kind of changes in laws or what you need to think of, how the visa process works. So can you get a visa when you're on a bus, or is it only through an international airport? It's all listed there. And I always check in on this before I go to a country. And there was a warning that had come up and said that the Ukraine had changed its visa process, and I now needed a visa to get into the Ukraine. So I had time then to make a plan B. So I highly recommend, if you're doing a trip like that in the future, use those tools before, because that information is there. Don't rely on airlines. Don't rely on other kinds of resources, because they can be very vague, but a traveller website like that will explain what the visa conditions are.
So this is the Australian-based Smart Traveller website.
Yeah, it's smarttraveller.gov.au. It's probably worth writing down. You don't have to be Australian to use it. And there is some Australian-specific things, for example...
Travel advisories.
But for general travel information, safety, health concerns... It's a very up-to-date resource.
I just want to add to what Claire said. I think similar kind of information is always available on the respective country tourism website. So for example, in India also, we have like Incredible India website, wherein anything like any hurdles, like for example, even demonetization thing that you mentioned. So since you were already in the country, that is why you face that you face that challenge. However, all such things, all similar challenges are always there on the tourism website. So my suggestion to anyone who is traveling to the foreign country is it's always important that at least go through that country major tourism website, apart from the embassy website as well.
Okay, so that's a good tip. So look at the country's main officially sanctioned tourism website. Perhaps also look at the Home Office or the Department of Foreign Affairs in that specific country to see if there are any advisories or anything like that. Okay, do we have any more questions from the floor? We have a question right from the front row, please. Could you please introduce yourself and your question?
Thank you so much. My name is Marin Minamia, and I have a question for Claire. Thank you for sharing your story, and I think what you went through is absolute nightmare for anyone. I'd like to know from your experience that you've actually gone through how we can prevent such situation, because I cannot imagine something like that happening in Paris in broad daylight, in noon, in open space. Where were you? Was it at night? Was it in a dark alley? I'd like to know, and how we can prevent that.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
No, great question. So for what happened to me, it was nighttime. It certainly wasn't in a dark alley or anything. I was walking just down an axe street, right next to the gendarme's residence, and the gendarme is the military police. So it's not somewhere where you would expect something like this to happen. And I was going to get a taxi, so I was walking to the taxi rank. This was before Uber, though, or Grab. I mean, if I had that service, I would order the vehicle right to my doorstep. But it's something we really don't want. We don't want that to happen to us. There are definite steps you can take, and one is really, if you don't know where you are or the area you're in or where you've been traveling, is trying to find out from locals where is safe and where isn't safe, particularly if you are going out at nighttime. There is it's not a myth. This one isn't a myth. The rates of sexual violence go up at night. They just do. And nighttime, not just sleeping before sleep. Nighttime at 6 a.m. in the morning as well in some countries, if it's still dark, is still a risk. So definitely asking a local where you're staying or a hotel, or if you know somebody, just saying, can I go out at night? And if not, what are the best ways for me to stay safe if I do? The other one is, unfortunately, it can happen in daylight. What happened to me, the stranger danger, I know that's our worst fear. It's actually the most uncommon form of rape. The one is the one that the person you think you can trust or know. So please be very cautious when you are out in restaurants, in bars, and you're having a drink, for example. Don't take a drink from a stranger.
Yes.
Please do not accept a drink from a stranger. They call it the date rape drug. It's very, very common in every country in the world. You order your drink and get it from the bar. The same applies to food. So have been advised in some countries, do not accept food from strangers either, because it may not be for sexual violence, it could be just to rob you. It can happen. So
It's also really important to realize and to accept you cannot prevent the unexpected. You cannot. And if you approach the unexpected as something that you can protect yourself from, you're starting off on the wrong foot. You prepare for the unexpected. You do not prevent the unexpected, as the three of them have shared.
Oh, can I just add one? I know you said there's one thing, though, that I would advocate for anybody to do, and because it will empower you not only as a woman in your everyday life or as a traveler, but to keep you safe, is doing some form of self-defense, really, because it teaches you to use your voice, first of all, and that's really important. Our voice can prevent a lot of things, being able to speak out and being confident. It can teach you to say no, and then, of course, it does equip you with some simple movements that can just get you out of a potentially dangerous situation.
To answer your question, maybe. So, for example, I usually keep a small Swiss knife and a pepper spray when I travel in India.
No,
So,
I wouldn't recommend that at all. My attacker had a knife and a can of mace. Sorry.
It's how you choose to prepare is your own. You have to be able to take the individual stories and individual experiences and decide for yourself what works. What these three panelists have shared with you today are personal stories. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of today's panel, no two accidents, emergencies, and events will be the same. What you take away from today isn't just the skills or the knowledge, but it is the value of, to me, self-confidence. It is the value of being calm and composed when faced with danger. And it's also the value of being able to say, this has happened, and I'm going to get up, and I'm going to move forward. The fear of unexpected events, accidents, and emergencies cannot and must not stop you from traveling. I'm going to wrap up today's panel, and I want to share with you a quote that I coincidentally shared last year because it kind of summarizes what we've been talking about today, and it's by a woman that I admire a lot, Marie Curie. She said, "Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Pack your bags and go and be safe." Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sumitra, Aisha, Claire, and Prachi, for sharing your brave stories.